Joining us now is Tony Perkins, the president of the Family Research Council. Mr. Perkins is one of the social conservative leaders who met last weekend and endorsed Rick Santorum. Mr. Perkins, thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Good evening.
I want to defer to Ed Schultz for the first question here.
Tony, Ed Schultz, good to have you on the program tonight. Thanks so much. Your group
evening,
down in Texas made a decision to go with Rick Santorum over Newt Gingrich. How solid is your group behind Santorum in the wake of this, which seems to be a very stunning Gingrich win in South Carolina tonight? Would this group coalesce, shift, and go to Newt Gingrich? Take us down that road.
Well, yeah, good question, Ed. Well, first, let me be clear. I was the spokesman for the group. I have not endorsed, my organization has not endorsed a candidate. But to your question about the group and what they did, where about 75%, a supermajority of those gathered, decided that Rick Santorum was somebody that they could support. I don't think they leave. The reason they supported Rick was they had all the polling data. They saw the trends in South Carolina. And this has been a remarkable week, if you think about it. And it's been a bad week for Romney because he went in with 2 victories under his belt, a third anticipated, and he comes out of the state with 1 victory. Now Newt has a victory and Santorum has a victory. I don't think Santorum's support, and I'm in Florida right now, I've been here for the last 2 days at different events, I don't think his support diminishes. I think there's, as you've all talked about earlier tonight, the path to the nomination has just gotten longer, which means more road hazards. And with Newt driving, people anticipate there could be, there could be some issues along the way that could be an opening for Rick Santorum.
Mr. Perkins, I know that throughout your history of activism and the mission of the Family Research Council has really been to try to get a strong government voice for what you see are family values that should be promoted in some cases through policy. Is part of the worry about Newt Gingrich moving forward not just that he's had a complicated moral, sexual, and marriage history of his own, but that he has been hypocritical, advocating things for the country that he hasn't been able to do for himself? Does personal hypocrisy play into the effectiveness of a government spokesperson for your ideas?
Well, Rachel, I think it's an issue of there are questions that were brought up even this week that play to the character issue. And again, people, and you've talked about this tonight on the show when you talk about evangelicals being forgiving, they understand, people changing their lives and coming into a relationship with Jesus Christ. But that does not answer the issue of someone's capability of leading. So there is concern over that. There's concern over whether or not he would be that consistent, stable leader. But I think it's going to be very interesting because I don't think Rick is not going to get out of the race. He said that tonight. He's going to be in Florida. Newt, I thought, as Chris talked about, I did think it was a good speech tonight, but he kind of, it sounded a little bit like the Newt Gingrich back before Christmas when he was at the top of the polls in Iowa. He's almost skipped over the nomination process and talking about a general election. And I think that makes him vulnerable if he overlooks Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum in this process. And as you pointed out rightfully, Ron Paul cannot be ignored in this process.
Reverend Perkins, Al Sharpton, as you, and you're right about forgiving personal character questions, but what about social policies, this whole demonizing of poor people and dealing with those that need help? Isn't it really part of the Christian spirit in the evangelical community to really reach out as Jesus did to those that are underprivileged and that need help rather than demonize them? And when we hear Mr. Gingrich talk about food stamp people and food stamp president, when there were 14.7 million food stamp people under Bush, only 14.2 under Mr. Obama, doesn't truth and being understanding of the poor also fit into the Christian spirit?
I think it does. I think that what we talk about is the avenues of approach of dealing with those issues. I don't think the solution is necessarily in any party. It's in the policies adopted. And obviously the difference here is the Republican Party believes that the way to solve those issues of poverty in opportunity, or is to create opportunity through the private sector. And I think that's the contrast that Newt Gingrich was making tonight in contrasting his policy ideas to that of the president.
Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council. We are grateful to have your time tonight. We know you're in great demand in terms of your perspective on these things. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rachel.